There is a specific, jagged kind of rage that lives in the gut of a man who is exactly 4 hours away from a non-refundable tropical vacation and currently staring at a white Range Rover blocking his exit. It's a cold heat, a sensation that starts in the base of the spine and works its way up to the jaw, tightening the molars until they feel like they might shatter. I stood on my front porch, gripping a travel mug of black coffee so hard the plastic was starting to creak in protest. It was 8:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was already beating down on the Florida asphalt with that humid, oppressive weight that promises a thunderstorm by mid-afternoon. My flight to Honolulu, a trip I had been saving for over the last 3 years of grinding overtime and skipped holidays, departed at 12:30 p.m. sharp. My bags were packed. They were sitting in the hallway like loyal soldiers waiting for deployment. 2 oversized suitcases filled with swim trunks, linen shirts, and enough sunscreen to coat. A small whale. My passport was in my pocket. The Uber was scheduled to pick me up in exactly 1 hour. The only problem, the singular 4-wheeled $90,000 problem, was that I couldn't move my truck. My Ford F-250, a beat-up but beloved beast of a vehicle that I affectionately called the Tank, was currently parked on the street. I needed to move it into the garage for safekeeping while I was gone. I lived in a decent neighborhood, but leaving a truck loaded with a locked toolbox on the street for 2 weeks was just inviting trouble. Between the street and my garage lay the apron of my driveway. And on that apron, parked with an arrogance that was almost impressive in its geometry, sat the Range Rover. It wasn't just parked. It was abandoned. It was positioned diagonally, the rear bumper encroaching a solid 3 feet onto my property line, blocking the entry to my driveway, while the front bumper jutted out into the road just enough to be annoying, but not enough to get clipped by passing traffic. It was a pristine, snow-white barrier of British engineering and suburban entitlement. It looked like it had been dropped there from space by aliens who didn't understand human property laws. I walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under my work boots. The sound was loud in the morning quiet, a rhythm of irritation. I stopped at the property line and inspected the vehicle. No parking permit, no handicap placard, tinted windows so dark they looked like voids. I cupped my hands against the glass and peered inside. The interior was cream-colored leather, spotless. A Starbucks cup sat in the center console. A yoga mat was rolled up in the back. It was the quintessential vehicle of someone who demands to speak to the manager before they've even looked at the menu. I checked the windshield. No note. I checked the house next door. My actual neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was a sweet 80-year-old woman who baked cookies that tasted like sawdust and love. She was currently in Boca Raton visiting her grandkids for the month. Her house, however, had recently been listed on Lux Stays, one of those high-end rental apps that allows rich tourists to pretend they live in the suburbs for a week. I had only discovered this fact when a bachelor party had thrown a keg off the roof 2 weeks prior, taking out my azalea bushes. The front door of Mrs. Gable's house opened. I straightened up, ready to have a polite, rational conversation. I work in construction supply logistics. I deal with angry foremen, hungover drywallers, and confused architects every single day. I know how to de-escalate. I know how to talk a guy down from a ledge when his lumber delivery is 3 hours late. A woman stepped out. She was the human equivalent of the car. Expensive, high maintenance, and taking up too much psychic space. She wore oversized sunglasses that covered half her face, yoga pants that probably cost more than my first car, and a flowing beige cardigan. She was holding a phone to her ear with one hand and a green smoothie with the other. "Excuse me," I called out, keeping my voice level, putting on my best customer service face. "Good morning." She didn't look at me. She held up a single manicured finger. The universal sign for silence, peasant. She continued talking into the phone, her voice carrying across the lawn. "No, listen to me, Stacy. The energy in that room was toxic. I literally couldn't breathe. I need a reset, a full chakra scrub. I told him, I said, if you bring that negative vibration near my aura again, I am calling my lawyer." I took a step closer, crossing the invisible line onto her rented lawn. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this your Rover?" She finally lowered the phone, sliding her sunglasses down her nose to look at me over the rims. Her eyes were icy blue and filled with a profound, aggressive lack of interest. It was the look you give a waiter who brought you tap water instead of sparkling. "I'm on a call," she said, her voice dripping with condensation. "It's an emergency." "I understand," I said, pointing at my truck and then at her car. "I'm leaving for the airport in less than an hour. I need to put my vehicle in the garage. You are blocking my driveway. I can't get in." She scoffed. It was a short, sharp sound, like a staple gun misfiring. "I'm just waiting for my Reiki healer to arrive. She's confused about the address. I'll be just a minute. Relax." "I can't really relax," I said, my patience fraying like a cheap rope under heavy load. "I have a flight, an international flight. If I miss it, I'm out $5,000. Please move the car. It will take 10 seconds. You can park it on the street." She turned her back to me. I said, "Just a minute. God, you locals are so aggressive. This is why I need this retreat." She put the phone back to her ear. "I know, right? He's literally harassing me right now. It's such negative energy. I feel like I'm being assaulted by his stress." "Ma'am," I said, my voice hardening. "Move the car." She waved a hand at me over her shoulder, dismissing me like a gnat. "I'm going inside to grab my charger. Just wait." She walked back into the house and slammed the door. I stood there. The morning sun beat down. A bird chirped cheerfully from the oak tree, mocking me. The humidity wrapped around me like a wet blanket. Just a minute. In my line of work, just a minute is the most dangerous phrase in the English language. Just a minute is how deadlines are missed. Just a minute is how concrete sets in the drum of the mixer before you can pour it, ruining a $60,000 truck. Just a minute is a lie people tell when they don't respect your time, your property, or your existence. I looked at my watch. 8:22 a.m. I forced myself to breathe. I walked back to my porch and sat on the steps. I would give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really was just grabbing a charger. Maybe she was having a bad day. Maybe her Reiki healer was actually lost. I stared at the second hand on my watch. It swept past the 12. 1 minute. I looked at the house. No movement. 2 minutes. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. 5 minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. My shirt was starting to stick to my back. 10 minutes. At the 12-minute mark, I walked back to the car. I knocked on the window, just to see if maybe, somehow, she had snuck back out and I missed it. Nothing. I walked to Mrs. Gable's front door. I rang the doorbell. I could hear it chiming inside. Ding-dong, cheerful, inviting. No answer. I rang it again. I pounded on the wood. "Ma'am, I need you to move the car." Nothing. Silence. Then, I heard a laugh from inside. It was faint, but distinct. She was in there, probably in the kitchen, probably laughing with Stacy about the rude man outside. I walked back down the steps. I stood in the driveway and looked at the Range Rover. A dark thought crossed my mind. I could hook a chain to it. My F-250 has a 6.7-liter Power-Stroke turbo diesel engine. It produces 1,050 pound-feet of torque. I could drag that rover into the middle of the street like a discarded toy. But that would be property damage. That would be a lawsuit. That would be me missing my flight because I was in handcuffs explaining to a deputy why I dragged a rental car upside down through a subdivision. No. I needed a solution that was legal, immovable, and absolutely devastating. I looked at the time, 8:36 a.m. I needed to secure my property. That was the legal framework. If I left for 2 weeks with my driveway blocked, I couldn't secure my home. I had a right to protect my perimeter. I pulled out my phone. My contacts list wasn't filled with Reiki healers or life coaches. It was filled with guys named Sledgehammer Steve, Electrical Ed, and Big Mike. My thumb hovered over Big Mike. Heavy haul. Mike runs a transport company that moves the kind of things that make the ground shake. Generators, bridge girders, precast culverts, and occasionally surplus infrastructure. We had a massive project wrap up 3 days ago, a highway diversion about 4 miles from my house. I was the project manager on that site. I knew the inventory. I knew for a fact Mike had a flatbed sitting at the yard loaded with K-rails, waiting to be returned to the state depot on Monday. K-rails. Concrete Jersey barriers, 12 feet long, 32 inches high, reinforced steel and concrete. 4,000 pounds apiece. The kind of things designed to stop a semi-truck from careening into oncoming traffic. They are the immovable objects of the modern world. I hit the call button. It rang once. "Yellow," Mike's voice rumbled through the speaker. He sounded like he was gargling gravel. "Mike, it's Dan. Where are your boys right now?" "Dan, the man. Just finishing coffee at the yard. About to haul those barriers back to the state depot." "Why? You miss me already?" "Project's over, buddy. I don't work for free." "I don't want you to work for free," I said, my eyes fixed on the white Range Rover. "I need a favor. A rush job. A drop-everything-and-drive job." "I'm listening." "I need 4 K-rails delivered to my driveway, immediately, like sirens blaring. Run the red lights immediately." There was a pause on the line. I could hear Mike shifting in his chair. "Your driveway? Dan, those things weigh 2 tons a pop. You building a bunker? You expecting a zombie apocalypse while you're in Hawaii?" "I'm boxing something in, Mike. Someone blocked me in. I'm leaving for the airport in less than an hour. She said she'd be just a minute, and then vanished into the house." Mike laughed. It was a deep, terrifying sound that started in his belly and ended in a wheeze. "Oh, I love a spite drop. You serious?" "Dead serious. I've got that bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. 23-year you've been trying to buy off me for a year. It's yours, plus double the delivery fee in cash." "The Pappy?" Mike's voice dropped an octave. "You're trading the Pappy for a spite wall?" "I am. I'm 4 miles away. I've got the Princeton piggyback forklift on the back of the rig. We can be there in 12 minutes. "Do it. I'll text you the layout. I need a full box. 4-point containment." "Understood. Dan, you're a legend. See you in 10. I hung up. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The anger hadn't vanished. It had just changed states. It had gone from gaseous rage to solid concrete. I went back inside the house. I moved my suitcases to the front porch. I did a final sweep of the rooms. I locked the back door. I set the thermostat to 78 degrees. I watered the plant in the hallway. I walked back out. 8:44 a.m. I looked at the neighbor's house, still quiet. She was probably doing yoga, or maybe she was on the phone with her lawyer, suing the wind for blowing too hard. Then I heard it. It started as a low vibration in the soles of my feet. Then it became a rumble. Then it became a roar. A heavy-duty Peterbilt 389 turned the corner at the end of the block. It was bright red, chrome stacks gleaming in the sun, pulling a 40-foot flatbed trailer. On the back of the trailer sat 8 concrete Jersey barriers, gray and scarred from highway use. Mike was driving. He blasted the air horn, 2 short bursts that sounded like the trumpet of doom. Honk honk. Curtains twitched in the houses across the street. Old man Jenkins, who sat on his porch all day watching the grass grow, stood up and took his hat off. He knew machinery when he saw it. The truck rumbled up the street. The air brakes hissed violently as Mike parked right in front of my house, double parking and blocking the entire lane. Mike hopped out of the cab. He was 6'4", shaped like a beer keg made of muscle, wearing a neon yellow vest that looked like a napkin on his chest. He was chewing a cigar that wasn't lit. "Where's the target?" Mike grinned, looking around. I pointed to the Range Rover. "There she is." Mike whistled low and long. "Pretty car, 2024 Autobiography Edition. That's $100 grand sitting there. Shame if it never moved again." "Can you do it without touching it?" I asked. "I don't want a damage claim. I just want containment." "Dan, I can thread a needle with that forklift. I can pick up a dime off the sidewalk without scratching the concrete." He walked over to the car and paced it out. 12 feet long. "Yeah, the barriers fit perfectly. We go tight? Or we give her room?" "Give her 2 inches, I said. "Just enough so she can see daylight, but can't use it." "You got it." Mike climbed onto the back of the truck and fired up the piggyback forklift. The engine roared to life, a loud, clattering diesel noise that shattered the suburban peace. He unchained the first barrier. The forklift tines slid into the pockets. He lifted the 4,000-pound slab of concrete as if it were styrofoam. He drove the forklift off the back of the truck and spun it around. He approached the rear of the Range Rover. This was the moment of truth. If Karen came out now, she could stop it. I watched the front door of Mrs. Gable's house. Nothing. The noise of the forklift was deafening, like a tractor fighting a chainsaw, but apparently her chakra cleanse involved noise-canceling headphones. Mike lowered the first barrier. He inched it forward. Closer. Closer. He set it down. Thud. The ground shook. A cloud of dust puffed up. The barrier was positioned exactly 2 inches from the Rover's rear bumper. He spun around and went back for the second one. "Front!" I yelled over the engine. He grabbed the second barrier. He maneuvered around the mailbox, avoiding my flower bed with practiced ease. He lined it up with the front bumper. Thud. Now the car was sandwiched, front and back. It couldn't move forward. It couldn't move backward. But she could still turn the wheel and maybe, with a 1,000-point turn, shimmy out over the grass. "Sides!" I signaled. Mike grabbed the third barrier. He drove it up the driveway and placed it along the driver's side. This was the tricky one. He had to place it on the grass, right along the edge of the driveway. He dropped it. Thud. It landed with a finality that felt spiritual. The driver's door was now blocked. There was maybe 3 inches of space between the door panel and the rough concrete. She would have to be a sheet of paper to squeeze out. "Last one!" Mike yelled. He grabbed the fourth barrier. He placed it on the passenger side. Thud. The box was complete. The Range Rover sat in the center of a perfect gray concrete rectangle. It looked like an art installation titled "The Futility of Man." The barriers were chest-high relative to the sedan's ride height. The car was utterly, completely, hilariously entombed. Mike killed the forklift engine. The silence that rushed back into the neighborhood was ringing. "That ain't going nowhere," Mike said, jumping down and wiping his hands on a rag. "That's DOT-approved containment right there. You could hit those with a tank, and they wouldn't move." "It's beautiful, Mike," I said, tearing up a little. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I reached into my bag and pulled out the bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. I handed it to him. Then I handed him an envelope with $500 cash. "For the crew," I said. "You're a saint, Dan," Mike said, tucking the cash into his vest and cradling the bottle like a baby. "Have a nice trip. Send me a postcard." "I will." Mike loaded the forklift back onto the truck. He rumbled away, blasting the air horn one last time. I was alone again. I looked at my watch, 8:58 a.m. I walked over to the concrete. I had one last touch. I pulled a large orange sticker from my backpack, leftover, signage from the job site. I peeled the back off and slapped it onto the street-facing barrier. Caution. Construction zone. Authorized personnel only. Hard hat required. My phone buzzed. It was my Uber driver. "I'm here." A Toyota Prius pulled up to the curb, stopping behind where the Range Rover would have been if it wasn't currently in jail. The driver, a young kid named Kevin, rolled down the window. He looked at the barriers. He looked at the car inside them. He looked at me. "Whoa," Kevin said. "What is that?" "Art," I said, picking up my suitcases. "It's performance art." I threw my bags in the trunk. I took one last look at the house next door. The blinds were still closed. The silence was absolute. "Airport, Kevin," I said, climbing into the back seat. "And step on it. I've got a Mai Tai with my name on it." As we drove away, I didn't feel stress anymore. I felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. I imagined the moment she would walk out. I imagined the look on her face. I imagined the phone call she would make. And then I realized I had a Ring doorbell. I could watch the whole thing from 30,000 feet. The first notification came through at 11:30 a.m. I was sitting in the Delta Sky Club, 3 scotches deep into my vacation, eating cheese cubes and staring out at the tarmac. The airport Wi-Fi was strong. My phone buzzed on the table. Motion detected. Front door. I choked on a pretzel. This was it. I opened the app. The video feed loaded in glorious 1080p high definition. The door to Mrs. Gable's house opened. Karen stepped out. She had changed clothes. She was now wearing a white linen suit that looked like she was about to officiate a beach wedding. She had her purse over her shoulder and her car keys in her hand. She was looking down at her phone, typing furiously. She walked down the path. She stepped onto the driveway. She stopped. She didn't just stop. She froze. Her brain seemingly unable to process the visual data it was receiving. Where her car should have been, there was a wall of gray concrete. She lowered her phone. She took off her sunglasses. She blinked. She walked forward slowly, reaching out a hand as if to check if the barrier was a hologram. She touched the rough concrete. It was real. She looked left. Concrete. She looked right. Concrete. She walked a full circle around the perimeter. She stood on her tiptoes to peer over the barrier at her car, which was sitting safely inside like a pearl in an oyster. Then, the sound came. Even through the tiny microphone on the doorbell, it was piercing. "What?" She screamed it at the sky. "What is this?" She tried to push the barrier. She put her shoulder into it and shoved. Now physics is a harsh mistress. A 120-pound woman in sandals pushing against a 4,000-pound reinforced concrete block has exactly zero effect. She bounced off it. She tried to squeeze between the gaps. Mike had done his job too well, the Sarscombe. Corners were tight. She could get an arm through, maybe a leg, but not her body. She ran to the front of the barrier and saw the sticker. Caution. Construction zone. She ripped the sticker off. She crumbled it up and threw it on the ground. Then she stormed up my driveway. She marched right up to my front door and started pounding on it with both fists. "Open the door!" she shrieked. "Open it! I know you're in there!" She pounded for a solid minute. She kicked the door. She put her face right up to the camera. "I see the camera!" she yelled, her face distorted by the fisheye lens. "I know you're watching. This is illegal. This is kidnapping. You kidnapped my car. I'm calling the police." I took a sip of my scotch. "Please do," I whispered to the screen. "Please call them." She pulled out her phone. Her fingers were shaking so hard she dropped it twice. She dialed 911. I watched as she paced back and forth in front of the concrete box. She was gesturing wildly to the air. "Yes, emergency! I'm being held hostage. Well, my car is. No, I'm not hurt, but I'm emotionally devastated. Send everyone." I signaled the bartender. "Another one, please. Make it a double." 10 minutes later, the second notification hit. Motion detected. Driveway. A police cruiser rolled into the frame. It wasn't a lights and sirens arrival. It was a slow, casual roll. A uniformed officer stepped out. He was an older guy, heavy-set, moving with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who was 2 years from retirement and had seen everything. He adjusted his belt. He walked up the driveway. He stopped at the barriers. He took off his hat. He scratched his head. Karen was on him immediately. "Finally!" she yelled. "Arrest him! Arrest the man who lives here!" The officer, let's call him Officer Miller, held up a hand. "Ma'am, lower your voice. Who are we arresting?" "The psycho who lives here. He trapped me. Look at this." She gestured to the concrete tomb. Officer Miller walked around the box. He leaned over and looked at the car. He looked at the property line. He looked at my house. "Is the homeowner here?" he asked. "No. He ran away. He fled the scene." "Fled the scene?" Miller asked. "Or went to work?" "He said he was going to the airport. He's a fugitive." Officer Miller sighed. He walked over to the barrier and kicked it with his boot. It made a dull, solid thud. "Ma'am," he said, "is this your property?" "No," she stammered. "I'm staying next door, but the driveway, I just parked here for a minute." "So you parked on his property?" "It was just for a minute. That doesn't give him the right to build a wall around me." "Well," Miller said, looking at the layout. "Technically, he hasn't touched your car. I don't see any damage to the vehicle. Do you?" "I can't see the vehicle. It's in a dungeon." "And these barriers," Miller continued, ignoring her hyperbole. "They seem to be entirely on his land. Maybe inching into the easement, but definitely not on the public road." "So, move them. You have a truck. Push them." Officer Miller laughed. It was a dry, wheezing chuckle. "Ma'am, that's a Dodge Charger. If I push that, I'll crumple my grill and the sergeant will have my badge. That's structural concrete. You need a crane." "Then get a crane." "The police department does not have a tactical crane unit," Miller said. "This isn't a criminal matter. This is a civil dispute. He put some construction materials on his driveway. You parked in his driveway. It's a stalemate." "You're useless!" she screamed. "I have rights. I have freedom of movement." You are free to move, Miller pointed out. Your car, however, seems to be part of the Foundation now. I suggest you call a towing company or a contractor. I'm suing him, and I'm reporting you. Okay, Miller said, putting his hat back on. I'll write up a report stating that no crime was committed. Have a nice day, ma'am. Wait, you can't leave me here? I'm afraid I can. Good luck with the wall. Officer Miller got back in his cruiser and drove away. Karen stood there, alone with the concrete. She kicked the barrier. She grabbed her foot and hopped around in pain. I closed the app as the flight attendant announced boarding for Honolulu. I walked onto the plane with a lightness in my step that defied gravity. I found my seat, first class 2A, and settled in. As the plane taxied down the runway, I thought about the next 2 weeks. I thought about the sun. I thought about the surf. And I thought about the fact that concrete takes 28 days to fully cure, but it only takes one morning to ruin a Karen's entire month. Hawaii was everything the brochure promised. The air smelled like plumeria and salt water. The ocean was a gradient of blues that didn't seem real. I checked into my hotel, a resort on the North Shore, where the only stress was deciding between the infinity, pool, or the beach. But let's be honest, I wasn't fully there. Part of me, the petty part, the part that felt vindicated, was back in Florida, haunting my own driveway through a 5G connection. On day 3, the situation escalated. I was eating a poke bowl on the lanai when my phone buzzed. A text from Dave, my neighbor across the street. Dave is a retired mechanic who spends his days restoring a 1969 Mustang and watching the neighborhood like a hawk. Dave. Dude, you are a legend. There is a flatbed tow truck in your driveway. The driver is crying, he's laughing so hard. Me. Send pics. A moment later, a photo arrived. It was a masterpiece of composition. A large flatbed tow truck from Al's Towing was parked in the street. The driver, a guy with a ponytail and a cigarette dangling from his lip, was leaning against the fender. Karen was standing next to him, pointing at the barriers. Her arms were wide, her face red. I could imagine the conversation. Karen. Just hook it. And pull it. Driver. Lady, if I hook that, I'll rip the bumper off your car. And I can't lift the concrete. My winch is rated for cars, not bunkers. I zoomed in on the photo. The driver wasn't even trying. He knew physics. He knew that even if he could drag the barrier, it would grind across the asphalt, destroying my driveway and probably swinging into the Range Rover. It was a high-risk, zero-reward scenario. I texted Dave back. Did he move it? Dave. Nope. He charged her a service call fee and left. She threw her smoothie at his truck. I laughed so loud I startled a gecko on the railing. On day 5, the lawyers got involved. I received a voicemail from a number with a local area code. I put on my headphones and listened to it while watching the sunset. Mr. Daniel Miller, the voice was nasal, clipped, and trying very hard to sound intimidating. This is Arthur P. Halloway, attorney at law, representing Ms. Jessica Thorne. We are aware of the unlawful containment of my client's vehicle at your residence. This constitutes conversion, tortious interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. If the obstructions are not removed by 5:00 p.m. today, we will be filing an emergency injunction and seeking punitive damages. I took a sip of my Mai Tai. I decided to call him back. Not because I was scared, but because I was bored. Law offices of Halloway and Associates, a receptionist answered. Hi, this is Dan Miller. Arthur left me a love note. A moment later, Arthur was on the line. Mr. Miller, you are in serious trouble. Hi, Artie. Can I call you Artie? You may not. You need to remove those barriers immediately. I'd love to help, Artie, I said, my voice breezy and relaxed. But here's the thing. I'm currently about 4,000 miles away. I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That is not an excuse. You have agents. You have contractors. Call them. Well, see, that's the problem, I said, spinning a lie. As smooth as silk. My contractor, Big Mike? He's on a fishing trip. In Alaska. No cell service. And nobody else has the keys to the forklift. This is unacceptable. My client needs her vehicle. She has a life. She told me she'd be just a minute, I countered. I operated on the information provided. When 15 minutes passed, I assumed the vehicle was abandoned. I had a scheduled construction project, driveway reinforcement, starting that morning. I had to secure the site for liability reasons. You know how OSHA is. If a kid wanders in there and trips over a Range Rover, I'm liable. This is not a construction site. It's a spite fence. It's a designated storage zone for heavy logistical materials, I corrected. And frankly, your client is trespassing on an active work zone. I should be suing her. We will sue you for the rental car costs. She's been Ubering for a week. Go for it, I said. And I'll countersue for unauthorized parking, trespassing, and the storage fees for the vehicle. Do you know what the daily rate for secure, concrete-reinforced vehicle storage is? It's pricey. Mr. Miller. I'll be back on the 12th, Artie. We can chat then. In the meantime, tell Jessica to maybe try meditating. I hear it's good for stress. I hung up. I blocked the number. I ordered another round. On day 8, the weather in Hawaii turned rainy, so I spent the afternoon auditing the ring footage history. It was like binge-watching a reality show where the main character slowly loses her mind. Tuesday night, she tried to climb into the trunk through the back window. She got one leg in, but the spoiler blocked her. She flailed around for 5 minutes like a turtle on its back before giving up. Wednesday morning, a locksmith came out. He walked up to the barriers, looked at the lock on the car door, which was blocked by concrete, looked at me through the camera, gave a thumbs up, and left. He charged her anyway. Friday afternoon. She brought a guy who looked like a boyfriend. He was wearing a tank top and carrying a sledgehammer. This was the highlight of my week. He walked up to the barrier. He spat on his hands. He swung the sledgehammer with all his might. Clang! The hammer bounced off the reinforced concrete. The vibration traveled up the handle. The guy dropped the hammer and grabbed his hands, doubling over in pain. Concrete doesn't care about your gym muscles. Concrete is eternal. They left, defeated. By day 12, the activity had stopped. The Range Rover sat there, silent and entombed. It was gathering dust. A few leaves had fallen on the hood. A bird had pooped on the windshield. It looked sad. It looked like a relic of a fallen civilization. My flight landed at 4:00 p.m. on a Sunday. I was tan. I was rested. My skin smelled like coconut oil and victory. I took an Uber home. As we turned onto my street, my heart rate picked up. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The driver dropped me off. I stood on the curb and took it in. The barriers were still there. The construction zone sticker had peeled slightly in the Florida sun, curling at the edges. The Range Rover was still inside, visible only through the gaps, looking like a caged beast. I walked up the driveway, whistling a cheerful tune. I unlocked my front door. I hadn't even set my bags down when the neighbor's door flew open. It was immediate. She must have been sitting by the window, watching, waiting, obsessing. Jessica Thorne stepped out. She looked different. The high-maintenance gloss was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing sweatpants that looked slept in. She wasn't holding a smoothie. She wasn't on the phone. She looked like a woman who had spent 14 days staring at a concrete wall and realizing that the universe does not revolve around her. She marched across the lawn, but the fire was gone. She just looked exhausted. "You're back," she said. Her voice was flat. "I am," I said, unlocking my truck to get my mail. "Aloha. How was your chakra cleanse?" Her eye twitched, a small, involuntary spasm. "You are a psychopath. Do you know that?" "A literal psychopath." "I prefer logistics enthusiast," I said. "Do you know how much money I've spent on Ubers?" she hissed. "Do you know I missed 3 appointments? Do you know my rental agreement for this car expired 5 days ago? I'm paying late fees." "That sounds incredibly stressful," I said, checking a bill from the electric company. "Did you try waiting just a minute? Usually things clear up if you just wait a minute." She made a sound in her throat like a growling dog. "I want my car out, right now, today, or I swear to God, I will burn your house down." "Well, that would be arson, Jessica, and I have cameras." I pointed to the Ring doorbell. "Just move the damn blocks!" "I can do that," I said calmly. "But first, we have to settle the bill." "What bill?" I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I had typed it up on the plane, formatting it in Excel to look official. "Here is the invoice for the services rendered over the last 2 weeks." I handed it to her. She snatched it from my hand. "Invoice project, secure vehicle containment and perimeter defense. Client, uninvited guest, Range Rover owner. Date, Aug. 1st, Aug. 14th. Heavy equipment rental, forklift/truck, $1,200. Operator labor, emergency call-out, $600. Secure vehicle storage, 14 days at a $100 day, $1,400. Barrier rental, 4 units at $50 day, $2,800. Administrative fee, $200. Total due, $6,200. She stared at the paper. Her hands started to shake. "I'm not paying this," she whispered. "You're insane. I'm not paying you $6,000. "Okay," I shrugged. "No problem." I picked up my suitcase. "I'll leave the barriers up. Honestly, I've grown fond of them. They add a certain industrial chic to the property. I might paint a mural. On them! Maybe a picture of a tow truck." I started to walk toward my front door. "Wait!" I stopped. I turned around. "If I pay this," she said, her voice trembling. "If I pay this, will you move them right now?" "Immediately," I said. "My contractor is on standby." "I don't have $6,000. "You drive a $100,000 car and rent a house on Lux Stays," I pointed out. "I think you do, but I'm a generous God. I'll knock off the administrative fee. Let's call it $6,000 flat." She looked at the car. She looked at me. She looked at the street where an Uber was waiting to take her to yet another appointment she was late for. She realized she had no leverage. The police wouldn't help. The lawyers were too slow. The tow trucks were useless. She pulled out her phone. "Venmo?" "Venmo works." She tapped furiously on her screen. A moment later, my phone dinged. $6,000 received from Jessica Thorne. "And one more thing," I said, holding up a finger. "What?" she snapped. "I need to hear it." "Hear what?" "I need you to say, 'I should not have blocked your driveway.'" She glared at me. If looks could kill, I would have been vaporized on the spot. But she was broken. The concrete had won. "I should not have blocked your driveway," she muttered. And I will never say just a minute again. Perfect. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Big Mike. He has risen, Mike's voice boomed. Welcome back to the mainland, brother. I'm back, Mike. Initiate Operation Freedom. I need an extraction. We're just finishing up at the yard. I can be there in 20 minutes. Bring the boys. Dinner is on me. Part 5. The Resolution. 20 minutes later, the rumble returned. The red Peterbilt turned the corner. Jessica stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching with a mixture of hatred and relief. Mike rolled up. He hopped out, grinning like a shark. Did she pay? He whispered to me. Full freight, I said, handing him an envelope with $2,000 cash in it. I kept the rest. Call it a pain and suffering bonus. Mike mounted the forklift. The engine roared. He lifted the rear barrier. Clang. He lifted the front barrier. Clang. He lifted the sides. As soon, and I mean as soon, as the last barrier was lifted clear of the driveway, Jessica sprinted to the car. She didn't check for damage. She didn't wipe the bird poop off the windshield. She didn't look at me. She jumped in, keyed the ignition, and threw it into reverse. She backed out so fast she bottomed out on the curb, sparks flying from her exhaust pipe. She slammed it into drive and peeled away, the engine screaming as she tore down the quiet suburban street. She was gone. Mike loaded the barriers back onto the truck. Pleasure doing business with you, Dan. Always, Mike. The truck rumbled away. I stood in my driveway. It was empty. It was open. It was mine. I walked to the garage. I opened the door. I started up my F-250. The diesel engine purred. I backed it out and parked it right in the center of the driveway. Just because I could. I went inside, poured myself a glass of the duty-free whiskey I'd brought back, and sat on the porch. The sun was setting. The air was cooling down. The neighborhood was quiet. I still have one of the construction zone stickers. I keep it in my glove box. You know, just in case someone needs me to wait a minute.